Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, after you've usurped your historical heroes, who are you supposed to worship now? I'm Joe, your host for this week, and I'm joined by Kodie and Arthur. We're big boys with big feelings about history, and today we're going to talk about them.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
A lot going on this week. When was the last time we talked?
Was it a Friday last time?
Yeah, it was Friday. Because the next day was the 19th, right? When all the protests or the secondary protests were. I ended up going to that one I was talking about last time, the Adirondack Voters for Change set up. Basically, a bunch of volunteers that work for the Adirondack Voters for Change and people that were coming in could sign up. And then they would do testimonials. So like you would go in and like talk to one of them and just like provide like, this is how I've been impacted by, X thing, or just like kind of like talk about how you feel about what's going on. And basically they're using that for advocacy and promotion materials. Like these are real people in the Adirondacks and here's how they're impacted. It was kind of neat. They were super busy because there was way more people than I think they were expecting. which is good, I think. But yeah, it was cool. Met a couple people there, talked to them, and I'm going to probably try and record a testimonial and send that in at some point in the near future. Yeah, that's what I've been up to this last week.
I was going to ask if you did a testimonial while you're there, but yeah, you should.
I didn't do it while I was there just because they were pretty packed. I am going to send one in, I think. I just need to get my thoughts around what I want to say, but also hand to them is like, here, free use, right? Like put this wherever you want sort of thing.
And think about a testimonial and like, what do you want to say to express your political feelings? Perhaps you just want to hit record and go, That's the feeling.
In Eugene here, we just went out to visit some friends who live kind of near the coast. And one of them worked for a thing called Cahoots, which was like a nationally recognized program that actually Eugene has. And it was in like New York Times and Wall Street Journal during COVID, as it's like an alternative to calling the cops. It's like a crisis response. And it's funded by a company called Whitebird, who gets the contract and moves the money around and all that. And they shut down the program. And so that's kind of what's been happening here in Eugene, where the city wants to figure out how to, have an alternative program like that. And unfortunately, the bureaucracy doesn't allow it. But Springfield, our neighboring city, did keep a contract with them.
Interesting.
Just what we're doing for mental health here in Eugene is kind of shifting. And it's really an interesting area to live because people say that we have the most homeless per capita and from a population standpoint. And I think the people here are really struggling with how to deal with that because they're face to face with it. And Oregon's a really liberal state, but when it comes to these issues, they're becoming very centrist or conservative now. And so I've just seen how it's playing out, but that's kind of the Eugene, Oregon vibe right now is what are we going to do moving forward?
The alternative policing is kind of interesting concept. Like I think they did that in Burlington too, where it was still like part of the police force, but they hired a bunch of people that were more like community advocates, where they would basically like they don't have arrest power, but they're like, I think almost more like EMT kind of esque, right? Like they're trained in how to help people and de-escalate and mental health situations and stuff like that to respond to certain things, just because they couldn't respond to all the things that they were getting called for, and most of them weren't like violent anyway. So that's kind of like the way that they went to do it.
Yeah, it's all like de-escalation here. And something that kind of happened is, all of a sudden the police started getting parts of the budget from Cahoots, and then they started an internal de-escalation program. And then they actually got to be in charge of when people call, and they funnel some of it to Cahoots and some of it to the police internally. And then they just stopped funneling it to Cahoots, and the budget just started moving.
Yeah. Wait, so it started like we're funding Cahoots and we're funding the police, and then that budget that was going to Cahoots just went to the police force, like just translated directly over?
The city and Whitebird have kind of, been in bed in the last whatever years to move the budget in that direction.
You might say they've been in cahoots.
Yeah.
No, but this defund the police stuff is interesting. I was just trying to look up a meme. I couldn't find a good example of it to show you. It was like a Facebook link or something. I remember seeing memes around all the Black Lives Matter protests and discussions around defund the police, it was a really good example of how defund the police should work, because often it just seems like, oh, let's just cut all the funding for the police and then see what happens. And that's never like actual activists' plan. It's always to redirect that fund somewhere else, not to a private corporation necessarily. But so there's this giant teapot that says defund the police, and it has like 5 different spouts, and you tilt it forward and it's all pouring into different cups. And it's like mental health services, affordable housing, universal health care, because a lot of times police get called for like crisis response things that they're not trained to handle. It's like a mental health situation or a housing situation or a domestic violence situation. And you need professionals in those areas to take care of them, not someone who did 6 weeks of training on how to shoot their pew-pew. And, it's like we just need better government-funded services that aren't just violent responses to every random situation.
Yeah, definitely. Our city spent like $30,000 on armored cars and armored technology. Have you read like the Stingray, where they can kind of look past walls into homes and stuff? The kind of stuff that we're funding for local police departments to have is wild. Maybe I wouldn't put that on the here. I don't know. I'm going to get a knock at the door.
Some of that technology they get is diabolical, though.
It's like
and
military
rocket
stuff.
launchers. And
Yeah.
I just remember being annoyed when Pete Buttigieg was like, the weapons I carried around in Afghanistan have no place in American cities. And I was like, you shouldn't have been in Afghanistan with it in the first place. Whatever.
Joe, you mentioned how most activists don't want to just defund the police. They want to like put it into different buckets to reduce crime in other ways, right? And I think that message definitely does not translate, or it's not the message that gets pushed the most, right? It's definitely an easy thing for people to attack and see like, oh, they just don't want any safety. They want chaos. They want anarchy, right? Not at all like what's actually really being talked about there. It's like, how do you effectively treat the root cause of some of these issues and not just the symptom of crime by punishment, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
But like crime is like a secondary issue for me. Like crime is also just a made-up thing that's in relationship to a set of laws that are made up, like loitering as a crime. What the fuck are you talking about? But human suffering causes people to act out in desperate ways, which is where most crime comes from. It's just desperate people who don't have resources. So you make sure everyone has what they need. You're not really going to have any crime to talk about after that.
It just turns into this whole anti-police versus pro-police argument instead of like actually taking care of the problem. In the last week, there's been too many things for us to talk through in detail for all of these. So we'll hit the highlights and then possibly talk through a couple of these examples. The first one is the U.S. State Department shut down basically its anti-disinformation hub. So I think we talked about this a little bit in one of the earlier episodes, but there was an organization within the U.S. State Department called Global Engagement Center that was stood up to counter originally ISIS disinformation propaganda, and then that expanded to other countries as well. On April 16th, the last remnants of that from the U.S. State Department were officially shut down. That was basically the last internal U.S. government anti-disinformation organization that we really had at this point. So that's one thing that occurred this week. Non-U.S. related, but there's been a surge in deepfake disinformation related to the Canadian elections that are coming up on April 20th. A significant increase in fake political content that's circulating online, along with deepfake videos, misleading AI-generated posts and information, which not really surprising just considering that this is an election coming up with that country. The other big thing that happened on April 18th, the Trump administration basically took the former COVID.gov public health website and they've transformed that into basically promoting the lab leak theory as fact, right? They're presenting this theory as definitive fact at this point. Arthur, you mentioned there's been more on the arrests and kidnapping.
Yeah. Let me pull it up.
I think there was a couple different ones. There was 2 different judges that were arrested for obstruction. Well, the way that it was worded was obstruction of like immigration proceedings, right?
Yeah. I love this. There's a subreddit called Reddit Law. I don't know if you guys ever check it out, but I love it. It's just a bunch of people interested in law, I guess, and probably law professionals, and they kind of discuss these things. And I don't know, their slant is a little bit more left-leaning, okay? But I really love it because they just break it down. And I actually read, they posted like the attorney general had these claims of this judge, Hannah Dugan. And it actually goes through exactly what happened in the courthouse according to the U.S. Attorney General. And then you kind of follow these claims online. The original headline was like, Judge Hannah Dugan arrested for aiding and abetting a criminal or something like that. Then you read about it a little bit, and the claim is that Hannah Dugan advised, a migrant who was about to be arrested by an ICE agent in the court lobby to leave through a door that the jury and judge use privately. Okay, so that's like, whoa. And then the article becomes like, Pam Bondi comes out and the headlines are like, in Fox News, and she's like, this judge is arrested and we're going to arrest any judge that disagrees with Donald Trump's policies. Judges don't disagree. They literally weigh in on a law. And she decided it's, she chose as a legal professional that she weighed in that it was illegal and then chose to do that. And then she gets arrested. Anyway, okay, it turns out that the whole paperwork online shows that she did not do this whole thing about escorting out the door. An ICE agent came into the courtroom, tried to arrest the migrant in the courtroom, and she said, no, you can't do that. She directed them to an elevator where they rode 6 floors down, and then the ICE agent arrested the person. That is literally what happened, and that is why they are arresting a judge. It just seems like such a media, they're cherry picking, waiting for a judge to do something. Here it is. And now they're going to normalize on Fox News. Judges should be arrested if they disagree with the president. I just got fascinated by why they would arrest a judge. And it just seems like such a fight to pick a line to cross. They're both legal professionals. The same day, there was literally Trump pardoned this person who used a fallen officer's fund for plastic surgery. And Trump pardoned that person the same day too.
It's an illegitimate government. It doesn't make any sense.
Whoa.
Crazy. Yeah, I don't have anything insightful to say about it. It's just the chaos is crazy. It's crazy. And yeah, what do you do when you put all of your trust into these checks and balances that they've assured us keep the system stable, and all the people at the highest levels of government that have the most power are just blatantly disregarding all of these systems, all of these rules that are supposed to be in place. They're doing what they want and challenging other people to do anything about it. What are people going to do about it? I'm curious. I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah. I don't even know where to go from there, to be honest. I'm just
right? And then they just keep it coming where so they arrest these judges, and then it's literally not even a day has passed. And then the articles come up Trump's deporting U.S. citizens. And, it's a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old. It's all these kids with their mothers being deported. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're challenging U.S., birthright citizenship. It's not up for debate. And I guess they are forcing a debate, but it's not up for debate. And it's you're literally deporting U.S. citizens now. I think it's, it's we literally had a revolution over less.
Yeah. I'll just run through each of these really quick. U.S. citizens kidnapped and illegally trafficked out of the country, arresting judges, replacing COVID information with inflammatory theories, presenting as fact. I don't even think we talked about selling merchandise, promoting a 2028 run for president. That also came out this week.
Yeah, I just saw
website.
That.
Wait, back up a little bit and explain what the hell you're talking about.
So this week, Trump started selling 2028 merch, Trump 2028 merch on his website officially.
Amazing. Yeah. We all knew he was going to do it. Well, we can just wait 4 years. It's only his second term. He just has 4 years left. No, he's not going away. He has no plans to go away until he's dead.
Plans.
Here's the product description for the hat. The future looks bright. Rewrite the rules with the Trump 2028 high crown hat.
Rewrite the rules.
And then at the bottom, it has an asterisk that says, due to high demand, please allow 10 to 14 business days to process prior to shipping. There's no high demand. Come on. You just have bad, warehouses.
That hat is $50.
The whole thing is a story. It's like a deliberate story.
Yeah, totally. And it literally says rewrite the rules. But they're not saying which Trump, okay? So let's not all freak out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure they'll say that.
Well, isn't that Junior wearing the hat on the website?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, maybe they're implying it's him.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It says made in America on this one. So that is we'll see.
No shot. No shot it's made in America.
Prove
There's
it.
just no. Trump probably had them like made in China and like paused the tariffs like the day they had to be sent. And then, it's gonna.
That's a really handy tool, actually. Yeah, man, I didn't think about that. If I could become president, I could just make tariffs except for the things that I want and just like continue to,
Yeah.
manipulate the market to just make more and more money. It's brilliant.
I'm sure that he's done that for several
Brilliant.
things.
It's brilliant. So yeah, a lot happened this week. And then something else that happened, I don't think it's gotten headlines yet. Arthur, are you still watching the 50-51 subreddits, and have you seen all the drama going on there?
Yeah.
Joe, are you you're off Reddit, right?
Yeah, I haven't used Reddit regularly in a really
Yeah.
long time. I just kind of get on there if I'm researching something, and I'm trying to do the same thing with all my social media. My preference, if I'm going to be on social media, recently has been TikTok, because I find the format engaging, and people use green screen and will like post screenshots of articles and break down things. And I think there's a really good journalistic way. People tend to use TikTok when they're doing deep dives and stuff. So I find that format really engaging and kind of addicting as a user. But in general, I'm trying to like just watch Democracy Now! In the mornings and check out for the rest of it, because it's not healthy for me to be locked in like that.
Since you brought up Democracy Now!, thank you for mentioning that. Is kind of like, I've been listening to that, like trying to listen every morning just to their podcast that they put out. It is super helpful. It's great. Like, I'm actually surprised that I hadn't heard of Democracy Now! Like until I started talking to you guys more about it and like what you're listening to. Like,
They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know about them. Like, seriously though, the best journalism you're gonna find around, like really dedicated journalists, like doing the work. Like Amy Goodman and all them are rock solid journalists who passionately care about their product.
please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
Appointing judges used to be a gamble. How will they interpret? What will they think? It was chaos.
But isn't interpretation part of, judging?
Sure, as long as it's aligned to the right ideology. With the Liberty Institute's judicial guides, we pre-select candidates who align with the correct values. This ensures that the Constitution says exactly what we need it to say. Right now. No mess, no delay. Just rulings you can count on.
Judicial candidates are evaluated primarily for ideological loyalty. Legal training may be waived for exceptional compliance.
So going back to the Reddit piece of this in 50-51, over like the last week, I think like maybe a little bit longer. But Joe, so 50-51 it's a movement. There's a lot of people involved with it. It's pretty decentralized. There's groups like in all these different states. They organize across a bunch of different things from Discord to Reddit. I think they've got a website. But over like the last week, there's been a lot of subreddit drama, which I mean isn't uncommon. But I think the thing about this, as I've been watching it, you mentioned something, Joe, earlier that made me think of this, but is how like movements get co-opted or how movements get attacked online, especially when it comes to platforms where you're dealing with anonymous people that could be like supporters, right? Like trying to help out, but it's definitely a way that organizing groups can get infiltrated. And I think like we're seeing that happen to a much higher degree. At least I've seen it happen in a lot of the subreddits that have been stood up to help with organizing. I've seen a lot of dissent over the last few weeks where people are trying to inject basically like their niche thing that they really care about and try to basically, well, if you guys don't support this, then anyone that believes in this should leave this group. Or if we're not going to talk about this, then everyone should leave this group, right? Trying to really kind of go in and pick out controversial topics even within that larger, broader group or movement that all agrees that, hey, we're not in a great place right now and we need to figure out a way out of this. But trying to fracture it, right, internally. I think like we're seeing that happen, and it's definitely something that I wanted to talk about like in a future episode, is just like how movements get co-opted in general, like how Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street got co-opted and commercialized to some extent, but also fractured that way. But anyway, since we're seeing it in real time, I figured it might be a good thing to just chat about for a little bit.
Totally. Yeah. I guess I'm not super familiar with the 5051 stuff. I know everything I know about it, I've learned from you guys because I haven't really done my own digging on that. But what would you say is like the argument or the main thing that they advocate for? What is the demand or the central political point around which they're organized as a movement?
I think they try to use more like centrist, softer language, you know? I think I saw something like, it's like upholding the Constitution and ending executive overreach.
The difficulty, I guess, with these organizations when they form a group and they have a central point is, yes, they can get co-opted. I'm not like suggesting that they can't, but it also like if the message isn't really thought out, if the strategy isn't really well organized, it's going to be discussed and debated and critiqued, and internal contradictions that are already inherent in the central idea are going to come up if they exist. And so like, I'm just thinking of an example, like a lot of people, I think us included, are unhappy with the Trump administration and would like a lot of things to be gone about it, right? So Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, right? As a person, absolute clown, erratic, all over the place. But there's this, and I'm taking what I'm saying basically from Ken Klippenstein's newsletter. He follows Department of Defense news, stuff like that. And he's been talking about this in his newsletter. But yes, there have been internal Pentagon people, military officials, who have been trying to find ways to remove Hegseth as defense secretary. But the principle, if you want to maintain the government structures we have, the principle of a civilian oversight of the military is very, very important. And the idea that military people want to remove a civilian who was appointed by the Senate is troublesome, right? Because you got to do both those things at the same time. You got to critique the Trump administration for everything that's going on. At the same time, you have to defend civilian leadership over the military and not just say, oh, because this guy sucks, let's throw him out, let the military throw him out. That overthrows the whole premise of civilian oversight over the military. These internal contradictions get really troublesome when you're trying to organize a political movement, because you might not even be aware that there is a contradiction until people start pointing things out. I guess trying to sort of organize through the critiques, what's legitimate critique that we need to work on, and what is somebody just trying to divide the movement and break things apart. I think both of those things are happening, but it's difficult to know the difference sometimes.
I think your point about like trying to be very clear about the messaging and like these are the things that we can organize around and agree on. Like if it's the resignation or impeachment of Donald Trump, okay, that's a clear thing, right? That's a clear objective. Uphold the Constitution and protection of minorities. I feel like it's clear what you want, but no real action there. It's just like in general, I feel like we should do that, right? Like those are things that are, those are good things that we should all want to do. But I feel like if you're going to like say these are stated goals, like there should be some sort of action that you want taken. Just upholding something isn't really as easy to grasp what you're trying to get from that.
It's like I guess they risk isolation of like groups, and you try to write the messaging that's like vague enough to get the followers, but narrow enough for people. It's very difficult. And in-group fighting and like what's like political disinformation getting sown out there. I remember the Occupy movement, just to talk about that too, like in the same way. I watched some like Occupy interviews live, and some of the people that they interviewed were like, we don't know why we're out here. That wasn't actually, like, I've read online, like, these people were very organized. They know why they're out there. Who are you interviewing? So it's hard to say, like who's posting on this Reddit?
It's also, like, I think it's one of the reasons why I think the MAGA movement has been really successful over the last 8 years or so is because they do have more of a hierarchy and specific talking points that they all kind of align to once it goes out there, which is not something that I think on the more left side people want necessarily, like a hierarchy or leaders. I think in some scenarios you do want leaders, but I think there's an aversion to it or more concern about trying to organize around a hierarchy and leadership.
There's a healthy skepticism of leadership and hierarchies, but it's like, to your point, like to have a successful political movement, you need to be very specific.
You need to organize around very specific goals. The more vague they are, the more dangerous they are to being co-opted or misinterpreted. You can have your story told by someone else with a malicious intent that totally discredits your story. And so you have to really, really be careful in how you craft your story. What's the point? What are you trying to accomplish? What's the benefit of it? What are the dangers of not doing it? You have to be very specific. If you just say uphold the Constitution, most people have never read it. Most people have no notion of what the Constitution is other than this old document that a bunch of people made and it founded our country. So you have to be really specific about what you mean by uphold the Constitution.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of curious, if you had to craft like a couple talking points for a political movement today, what do you think they would be? I mean, I think impeach Trump or remove the administration. You could name who you want removed. That could be one thing. What do you think the other key pillars are right now and just today, like that you think should be a message?
Repeal Citizens Unite.
Yeah, I was expecting that. Yeah, get money out of politics. Yeah.
Like, it's just such a huge question because there are so many crises happening at the same time. And yes, the Trump administration in one way is a huge crisis, but it's also like a pimple on the nose of the face of the huge body that is also a crisis. I don't know. There's a global capitalist system that is ruining everything. And so I almost feel like we need a constitutional convention and like a new Bill of Human Rights where it's like literally, we are not going to pretend like worshiping profit is a reasonable way to organize a society ever again. We can't do that. We have to stop pretending like that's normal. And we have to ground ourselves in what community means, what it means to take care of each other, what it means to take care of the environment. And so things like a guarantee to housing, a guarantee to food, a guarantee to a job according to your ability and your situation. Every person can contribute something to their community, and we just have to organize, you know what I mean? So starting with these guarantees that if you're a human being living in this country, you are guaranteed a house, you're guaranteed food, you're guaranteed healthcare, you're guaranteed education, you're guaranteed an opportunity to do work that suits you. You know, that's obviously something that is super impractical when you hear it like that. But these are like some basic things that I think we need to tell people to be serious about. You know, these are things we can organize around and demand, but organizing is hard.
Yeah. I was literally going to say that like it was like my ask would be like a constitutional rewrite, you know, like the Thomas Jefferson every 19 years. I think a convention to do that would be fantastic. And yeah, I would love to get rid of antiquated laws. Like right now, ICE is arresting and detaining and kidnapping people because of, it's like what, the Alien War Act or something of the 1800s.
Insurrection Act, yeah.
What are you talking about?
This goes directly to like why they've had so much success, because they're organizing, they've got clear goals of what they're trying to accomplish. Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation, like building very specific goals that they want to accomplish over years. Like they've been planning these things. Just like you said, Joe, like I think there needs to be some sort of effort to outline what those things are that we think would actually substantially improve the life of everyday Americans, not just Americans, but across the globe, right? I was looking up the second Bill of Rights that was proposed by Franklin Roosevelt. And it's like a lot of the things that you're talking about were in that second Bill of Rights proposal for, was it right to work, adequate income for food, shelter, and recreation, decent housing, adequate medical care, Social Security, education, like freedom from unfair competition and monopolies, like all of these things that could have significant impact. So I wonder like who picks that up and who pushes it from the left.
Well, here's the part, not the Democratic Party. We've got to stop pretending like they're going to do it for us. They're not. They've had so many opportunities to do it and they don't do it. And you either have to conclude that they're incompetent or they're, you know, controlled opposition, if you want to put it that way. The Republican Party, all too happy to accommodate the desires of the less compassionate side of politics, let's say. On the left side, where we want to see these more compassionate reforms and we want to actually build a society that's meaningful, the Democratic Party ain't it. They're not doing it for us. Like they need to have like a quote unquote come to Jesus moment with themselves if they want to be serious as a party. But as people deciding on, you know, does the Democratic Party represent my interests? Probably not. Like there's a lot of cynical messaging going on with the Democratic Party, and they want you to think that we're going to take care of you, we're going to do this and that, and then a single-payer healthcare option turns into a marketplace that forces you to spend money that you don't have. Like, come on.
Thanks, Obama. Let's bring it back.
There's always that argument of if you don't participate in the two-party system, then you're not going to have a voice, because if you go for third party, then you're doing a protest vote or wasting it. I think you can make that argument at the national level. But unless you start organizing and creating those third parties at the local level, like, you're never going to have that base to actually be able to participate in national level politics. So I think build that base locally. And then if you don't have a candidate that can win in the next election, endorse the one that most closely aligns, right? Like, try to get as close as you possibly can. But yeah, I think building third parties locally and then trying to build those coalitions to actually get like a Bill of Rights passed. I don't know. That's what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, totally. And it always comes back to the question of participation too. Like, our participation in elections is abysmal, as I've mentioned before. And it's like, if we don't even get half of the people who are eligible to vote to show up to vote, can you really call this a democratic election? What is it actually representing? Just getting people to participate and like encouraging that participation. Both parties have a history of limiting participation in strategic ways when it suits their interests, and we got to deal with that too.
In Oregon, we keep trying to get star voting on the ballot. I don't know if you guys have local ballot initiatives to do this, or if it's just a
Is that
local
like
thing.
ranked choice voting?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's score, then automatic runoff, and you pick like your choices, and then they score it, and they pick two finalists, and they do a runoff vote, and whoever's closest, your vote goes. So it's never like a wasted vote, which is pretty nice. And it's a little bit closer to like proportional representation, which I think would definitely encourage voting. But yeah, it's so tough. Like, you have this two-party choice system, and if you're Nader, you're just seen as like this a-hole who takes away an election from somebody, and there's actually incentive to like do that now. It's kind of horrible. I would love like a third party. I think Bernie actually is encouraging. He was encouraging people to run independent, but I think the problem is like, who's going to vote for you?
Actually, I signed up for that. So you can go to Bernie's website now, and they've got a sign up where you can put your name into a list if you're interested in running or just supporting candidates. And you can do Democrat or independent and sit in, and then they supposedly will hook you up with committees in your area based off of like what you presented interested in, and like try to help you find things to run for, from local elections all the way up through state and federal elections. So yeah, I'll see what happens when like I got a text message. I don't know if I've got any emails or anything yet, but I'll let you guys know how that goes. That made me think, Arthur, maybe that's the other piece that needs to be on that second Bill of Rights, or whatever you want to call it. It's like national ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting would like kind of kill the two-party game they've got going. It benefits both of those parties a lot that it's always a choice between the two of them. Ranked choice voting would, and that just means that they're going to fight it. If we try to make it happen, they will fight, and it will be hard to win, but we need to.
Absolutely agree. Joe, before we jump into the main segment for today, anything you want to mention as we look to close out our episodes on propaganda in history in this next segment?
Take your story seriously. Yeah, we're going to pick apart the story. We're going to try to understand it. And that's what history is. It's not just a collection of data. It is a story you have to tell. And in order to understand the story, you have to talk about it and compare your understanding of it with other people's understanding of it. And until you have the same understanding, you don't have the same history. And that's kind of the point of talking about.
Yeah, to sort of start the more open discussion, let me just formulate an open-ended question here. This podcast has started around the idea of propaganda, around a certain way of telling stories about the present, about the past, that it's intentionally manipulative. That's part of what we're trying to discuss, is how we're being manipulated by different narratives, how to see through them, things like that. So just taking that idea of propaganda into account and thinking about what Howard Zinn said about especially history writing, his take on other historians, how they've written about Columbus, how he's deciding to write differently and why. What do we think is the relationship between history and propaganda? Like, is what Zinn doing not propaganda? Is it like purely without propaganda? Is that even possible? What's sort of the relationship between those? I don't know. In your guys' view, what are your takes on that?
I think my initial thought is like, as soon as you said that, like, is it still propaganda? Initially, I was just like, yes. Like, that was the first thing that popped into my head. Is like anything that has a political lens to it could be looked at as propaganda, but at the same time, he's very open about what he's doing and the bias that he has and like how that shapes his stories. The point of propaganda is to make people think through emotion or not think and just, react emotionally one way or the other. Like, you could almost look at the way that we taught history around Columbus, like, I was hoping you were actually gonna have, like, a little ditty like 1492 Columbus sailed, or was it I can't even remember it,
No,
but
that was 1492. Christopher
was
Columbus
that right?
sailed the ocean blue.
It was like, as representing the courageousness and the heroic things they did to cross this ocean and, try to discover a new world and everything. It's interesting because a lot of the propaganda that I think we've looked into so far, or at least that I have from, like, the fascist propaganda side, is more about how do you subjugate people through fear, whereas this is propaganda of, like, propping up the past, right? In order to rewrite the past sort of as a positive thing to make people have a different emotion, which is like, "Oh, I'm proud of, my heritage," or like, "Oh, like, I'm, descended from this thing that was great and amazing because they discovered this world." So it's like it's a different kind of propaganda, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's like building up these myths and then tying all of us to the identity of this myth itself. And then it kind of gets the blood on all of our hands. And then, yeah, we can't be like, oh, this is a bad thing. And it's just, we have to be purely good. So it's interesting. There are different ones. I thought it was really interesting phrasing that open-ended question that you had. It was really good. It was propaganda is exactly about seeing things from different perspectives to kind of take away the power. And Zinn is kind of doing a similar mission here where he is, going through and viewing different occluded voices and showing, what can be revealed when you look at it through different perspectives. So it's a really useful tool in how he analyzes history.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it more as like a spectrum almost. Like propaganda is, well, just thinking through the etymology, you think about propagation in plants. There's this idea of the thing that should be propagated. You pick out the best plants. You pick out the ones that produce the way you like it, and those are the ones you propagate, right? And so we kind of do the same thing with cultural ideas and with philosophies and stuff. We take the ones that feel, like you're saying, think through your emotions. Just as a meditator, I always like to say that there's the body, there's emotion, and then there's image or thinking, and that those three things are always going on. There's always a bodily feeling going on. There's always an emotion going on, and there's always some thought image or content in the mind going on. And so I think it's actually impossible to separate our thinking process from our emotions. No matter what we're doing, we're thinking with our emotions and through our emotions to some extent. But seeing this in Zinn's way of writing and approaching it just makes me feel like propaganda is more of a tool. It's important to be transparent that it is manipulative. Like it is trying to change something. There is an intention there. And so he's intentionally choosing, like Arthur's saying, all these occluded voices that haven't gotten the light, that haven't been, given a prominent place in the discourse. And he's intentionally trying to shift that point of view away from the conquerors and the nation states and the leaders and all that stuff, and over bias the people who've been oppressed, and from his point of view, to correct the propaganda that's already been done. But he's using propaganda to sort of correct it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have to be kind of flexible about, like, we are kind of trying to do a propaganda on the show about propaganda. We're trying to
Totally.
influence the way people talk about history, the way men think about masculinity, the way we have conversations with each other. Like we're saying, now we have a more wholesome, a more community-driven notion of how these conversations should take place, and we're trying to influence people to have better conversations, and that's our propaganda. We're trying to trick people into being decent or whatever it is, however you want to phrase it.
That would be wonderful.
But yeah, we have to be self-aware about what we're trying to actually do. What are we influencing?
Yeah.
What's the propaganda here?
I don't think it's tricking people though, if you're straightforward with what you're doing.
Like Zinn's not tricking anybody straight up about his intentions.
Yeah, he absolutely has a political view on it and a goal, right? Which is definitely part of, the definition for propaganda for sure. And just like you said, so do we. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. Are you feeling overwhelmed by conflicting news? Confused by competing histories? Simplify your reality with the newly unified Veritas Media Group.
Wait, what happened to the Truth Channel and Heritage Vault? My kids loved Veritas Press books.
They're all right here. Veritas Media Group has proudly integrated the nation's leading information providers under one trusted banner, powered by our cutting-edge Truth AI.
Wow. So all the news, history, and education comes from you? Isn't there supposed to be market competition?
There was market competition, and Veritas provides the truth that won. Choose clarity, choose coherence, choose Veritas.
Veritas Media Group defines truth based on proprietary algorithms and strategic alignment. Historical accuracy may be streamlined for narrative consistency.
I try to leave it more open-ended than specific, but I kind of trip myself up sometimes because it'll be too open-ended and I'm like, I don't even know what to ask now. But I kind of want to talk about if we have a responsibility to history, like if we think about ourselves as students of history, as storytellers, people who do the business of telling history, as citizens of a certain nation state. Do you guys feel any kind of, just thinking about yourself as a thinker, as a person in the world, do you have an ethical or some sort of responsibility type relationship to history when you think about your relationship to history? Like, what's that responsibility? How would we define it for ourselves?
I do put an ethical burden of engagement. And I think it's about knowing your context in the world where you're born into, what period you're living through. And it's definitely history is a part of that. But I wouldn't put that as an ethical thing onto other people, whatever. Feel it out for yourself.
Yeah, I guess when I hear that question, us talking about any historical events or anything on this show or otherwise, I do think that there is I don't know if it's a mandate or a requirement, or there's a better word here that I'm not thinking of just yet, but we need to, as much as possible, as much as we can with the information we have, identify what is factual. What you were doing today, Joe, or a book from Christopher Columbus's, as much sourcing as you possibly can get. And the reason I say that is because I think the degradation of what is truth and not having any shared truth or the whole alternative facts and things like that. It's a major reason why authoritarianism can thrive, right? Is through the fact that no one has this shared truth. So I guess my own personal moral belief is that we have a responsibility to make sure that as much as possible we are identifying what could be a shared truth, we considered a truth.
Yeah, it's such a crux in the whole conversation is this idea of truth claims.
Yeah.
Especially when news cycles are going so fast and so many things are happening and so many things are alarming and terrifying. It's on the one hand, just taking in all the information is a lot of work. It's a big weight just to absorb the face value headlines or whatever. And then there's the knowledge that so many people are manipulating sources, are intentionally skewing narratives. And maybe that's a silver lining with social media and video reports of average people with a cell phone somewhere in a war zone where they can just point their cell phone at a bomb that's falling and be like, look, there's a bomb falling. Do you believe me now?
Yeah.
It's a more direct kind of truth claim than, reading an article where somebody narrates it from a second or third person point of view.
Right.
But yeah, you were saying the stuff about truth claims and being able to agree on, what is true, what isn't true. It makes me feel like this whole thing, the business of figuring out what's true and agreeing what is true is already a political discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Truth telling historically has always been a political kind of thing, and that's sort of what Zen's getting at.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I don't know. You try to place it in a modern context, and the weight of it just feels so heavy.
Yeah.
Just knowing which sources to trust. Even when you do trust a source for a while, are they going to let you down eventually and do something shady? I don't know. It's a lot of work to figure out what's true.
talking about what's true it also is just a hard conversation to have sometimes, especially more left side of the spectrum. Like we need to find like what is that objective truth or something like that. What that can come across as is perspective truth, or like, someone has their own worldview because they've gone through different experiences. So their view on what is true might be a little bit different than yours, or they'll just have a different lens on it. But I don't think that changes the fact that, Columbus wrote down that he thinks that 50 people should subjugate all of like, you know what I mean? Like there's a difference there,
Mhm.
I think. And especially with historical, like get are verifiable or at least as closest to the truth as possible. But
Yeah, that's a useful thing to come back to, is just sort of like you were mentioning the sources of that Zen uses in the book Columbus, and that priest who wrote everything down in his diary. Like being, as storytellers, just being transparent about our sources, especially if it's a super significant piece of information or it's really going to impact someone. Is this whole argument we're hypothetically making about this or that topic, is that entire thrust of the argument set up on the foundation of a shady source, right? Can we really be transparent about those sources? Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. I tend to trust people who appear to be transparent about where they get all their information from and are willing to do some sort of self-critical analysis while they're telling you a story. Like, this is my take, this is what I think, but I understand it's come from this point of view. So like, part of me wants to be contrarian about this whole truth claim thing and say that there is no objective truth in a fundamental way, and that all you have, and I really believe this from like an individual experiencing the world point of view, like thinking about meditation and stuff. There just are different ways to look at the world, and different ways of looking are going to help you in different situations. Sometimes it helps to have a really big capital S self when you really need to defend your situation or something you've got going on. Sometimes that capital S self is just getting in your way and ruining your life, and you need to actually let it go completely and let your ego die for a minute so that you can be at ease and figure out the situation. But yeah, then you got artifacts like Columbus writing in his diary. Like, I don't know. It's a really messy, it's hard.
And Vin is definitely like doing away with those kind of things and looking at it from not just like, one truth, but, getting all these people's perspectives. I think that is more the world that we live in. So it's definitely really important.
well, maybe that's it too, Arthur. Where you're talking, maybe that's did a better job of describing what I mean than what I initially said, because you're saying like we need to bring like Zen bringing all these different perspectives in, and he's merging this to where like I'll draw my truth from that, but it's from like verifiable, literally, yeah, we're gonna have a lot of different perspectives come in, but I think that there's some things that are undeniable, right? Like there's verifiable fact, right? And the fact that there are things in that lens that are being questioned is kind of what I was getting at, with more of like we need to agree on certain truths, or at least as we know them as a society or as a science, like in science today, right? Like
Yeah.
acknowledging that shit changes, right? And we'll discover new things, because that's generally what we're pretty good at doing. But
I think I deleted it. I had some notes in this one note that I deleted because they were just quotes from this academic article I pulled, but it was really elaborate what you were just saying, Kodie, about the importance of, I guess what they were saying is provisional truth. Like as historians, as academic professionals, we can agree on a provisional truth given a set of circumstances. And for now, this is the objective truth, just for the sake of us having this conversation, with the understanding that shit is going to change eventually, like
Right.
Einstein's theory of relativity being revised in light of quantum mechanics. Physicists are still freaking out about all that. I heard someone say that 50% of professional mathematicians are unsure about whether or not we're living in a simulation. They could be convinced either way, maybe. And it's a weird world to live in when that's the case. But provisional truths, I think, are really important. It kind of makes me nervous when people start talking about there is this factual truth, because it starts to sound like, oh, there are two genders and nothing else.
Only the Sith deal in absolute, right? Which is an absolute. It's
I guess if you talk about truth too much, or yeah, truth too much, I guess. maybe that's the problem, right? We go down this road of like, wow, there's all these different scenarios where this could be true, this could not be true. Like if I view it this way, what is it, the whole parable of the cave, like depending on how you're looking at like things.
Mhm.
But what you said, Joe, about the provisional truth, like having like that sort of agreement that we can, as people, like come up with what we believe is the right thing or we believe is the right answer for this time, and reserve the right to change our minds. I think that piece is what people have trouble with. Like, oh, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
knew this yesterday. What do you mean? Like I could change? You know what
Mhm.
I mean? With a lot of things, it's really difficult to get over that hump sometimes.
Yeah, the unwillingness to change your mind about something, like,
Yeah.
that's scary.
And further, then it's like, well, we've made up all the truths up to this point, right? Like we've
Right.
decided what all these things are, like as people. So, yeah, everything would be a provisional truth until proven otherwise, or society decides to change its mind about something, right?
Yeah. What I also like about this idea of provisional truths and history and sort of relating to the past, because on one level, for a lot of my life, I thought that I was kind of exhausted by the idea of history. I was kind of just overwhelmed by knowing that there was so much to read, not enough time to read it, and that there's just not enough time to learn everything I want to learn about the past. But now, understanding a little bit more about how history gets written, it's also about like understanding that the past is not just some static thing
Mm,
that we can reach our hand into and take an artifact out and talk about it. Like the past as we experience it is a narrative in the present moment
mhm,
that someone constructed. And so what we're relating to is the process of narrating the past. And that opens it up in such a big way for me. It makes it creative, it makes it malleable. We have to talk about perspective because if you're going to tell me about this situation in the past, I have to know what point of view you're taking to understand what the benefits and the limitations of that perspective are going to be. Like you tell me the history of feudal Europe from the point of view of some duke, I want to
Yeah.
know what the peasants were dealing with, right? You can immediately figure out what's missing there.
yeah.
And I think that helps just understanding that like it's not just about absorbing facts about the past. It's about understanding how those facts get written, what the point of view is, and being really intentional about your consumption of those narratives. Right? Are there some historical narratives that we're passively just consuming as truth without questioning the perspective? Whereas others, we overemphasize our critique of their perspective and don't give them enough of a leeway to trust what they have to say. I don't know. I think there's some balancing we all have to do in that.
Just take like, if this is what we're talking about, how is like the average like everyday person with everything they have going on like have enough time
Mhm.
to, well, I've read this source, I need to go fact check it with three different ones from like different angles, right?
Yeah.
To what could actually be some sort of provisional truth out of this. Like, yeah, it's a sad state when there's very few media outlets that you could actually rely on, right, and feel comfortable
Yeah.
100% just saying like, "Oh, no, yep, I trust, this outlet or this institution."
Yeah. And it's a lot of passive consumption. Like here, you're actively searching for different viewpoints. They're just taking the word of the TV at, face value.
Yeah. And like thinking about what media can you trust, can you not trust, or whatever. I'm thinking about how my relationship to media has changed over the years. I don't think I trust any media institution completely to tell me that, like, no matter if it's coming from like an institution like the New York Times or the Guardian
Yeah.
or Fox or whoever, I really want to know specifically who the individual person is that wrote it before I'm like trusting or not. If it's Brett Stevens, no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you follow New York Times columnists or whatever. There are a lot of clowns on the New York Times
Yeah.
editorial board. But what I find more helpful is discovering a person's perspective that I trust.
Mhm.
Like there are a couple of Substack people. There's one guy, Ryan Grimm, who I've followed for a while, who does a lot of investigative journalism about government corruption. And I know from reading his work and listening to, he's done some YouTube shows over the years. Yeah, he did The Hill with Kristen Ball, I think. Someone else did. I don't remember all the people that are, but he was one of the hosts on that show for a while. And I trust his perspective on news to the extent that I know he is looking for corruption in government.
Mm.
I know that's his thing. Like that's the perspective that I'm going to get from him. He's going to point out some screwed up that people in the government did. And so because I know that perspective, then
I know what I'm trying to read. You know, if he starts to tell me some abstract cultural thing about how women shouldn't or should wear certain clothes, I'm gonna be like, why are you writing about this? That's not why I'm following you. So that saves me from the work of having to obsessively fact check everything he says, though, right? Or he's not just some rando giving a bit to me. I know his perspective. There's a history there. He might not be perfect, and I might get caught by some misinformation eventually. But for now, he seems to stick to that beat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I feel like people feel overwhelmed by this idea, oh, if I can't trust anything, and that means I have to do all this work, fact checking everything I see, yada, yada, yada. Maybe it means you just need to make more intentional choices about the narratives you're consuming.
Yeah.
So just cut out all the noise, figure out whose perspectives you actually find interesting and can trust, and what journalists are doing work that you think is good, and trust those handful of sources to get your general news or whatever these days.
I really like that. That's really great. Yeah, because it kind of gets away with the whole myth of, like having to listen to Fox News. And I think that's really great. A personal perspective is what people need.
Yeah.
Until, my grandma hears it and she's like, but I just love Tucker.
Well, that's the other problem with that, right? And actually, this conversation is really interesting to me because as I was like digging, I think it was the Russia episode I was working on, I was thinking about more, but I gained a bit of compassion, or a bit more compassion, I think, for those that have gone the MAGA route. And when I say that, what I mean is, I think they recognized that news and mainstream media and everything like that was not actually helping them or reporting on things that, a lot of them cared about, or the problems that they actually had, right? Like, I don't think that was a inaccurate conclusion for them to reach. But what I do think is a problem is, like, exactly what we're saying, as far as like finding perspective that you trust can quickly turn into finding a person that says all the things you already agree with, right? And that's one of the major problems that I think happened with that movement. Was it went from a very populist movement where a lot of people were going online and without the best intentions, right? Like, not actually trying to help people, but just trying to profit off that situation. That's how you end up with, Tim Pools or Andrew Tates, or like whoever else might be out there. I think that media is just going to kind of continue to break apart, and individuals will eventually have more of a voice than some of the institutions we've been used to.
And that's one of the things I've enjoyed about just a platform like TikTok, where individuals have their own channels or whatever, and a lot of investigative journalists do a lot of work on TikTok with like green screens and stuff. They'll like read an article and critique the point of view and tell you about it and everything. But the comments are so quick with the criticism too, that like any slip up, like any unethical stuff going on, people get called out so quickly. And like, it's interesting to see how quickly everything can move. But at the same time, it's like, if anybody's doing anything shady, all you got to do is open the comments and somebody's going to be pointing it out. And so if you're like, yeah, we have to find perspectives that we agree with or that help us understand the world and that we can trust to an extent, it's like that provisional truth comment. Like, I trust this person's perspective provisionally until they screw it up. There's the secondary practice of like, are you checking in on your perspectives from time to time to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do? Or are you, and I struggle with this all the time, just getting stuck in this over-consumptive media cycle of like, this is the news that I need to keep up with because these are the things I care about, but it's not doing anything for me. I'm not doing anything to help the world. I'm just increasingly miserable keeping up with it. So it's like, what's the use value of your relationship with the news? I'm still trying to figure that out. Part of it is like, what can I consume that helps me have better conversations when we come together and do this podcast? And for now, that's one of the basic things I'm doing, right? I'm not saving the world by over consuming the headlines, but I need to know enough to have an intelligent conversation about this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, that sort of playing with the balance and reevaluating your perspective and everything. I think that's less work than the constant, like, I have to fact check everybody all the time.
My engagement with the news is fueled purely by the hatred of them trying to make it this passive, you don't want to consume the news kind of cycle. So I'm like, F you, I'm going to know everything.
There's also something really sinister about that too. Like, bury your head and don't notice the bad stuff. I don't like that either.
Yeah. The sensationalized, like, short headlines and as you said too, like, about like New York Times and like all these media things, like there's so much slant. Like I read, I joined a bunch of these conservative subreddits and I was reading articles and like, it's just like fear mongering. It's like Reddit has, it's a dark day in this world. And it's like, what are you talking? I mean, like it might be or whatever, but like, that's just the phrase that they use to get people.
Fear. Must have fear.
Yeah.
Like that's what sells. That's one of my problems, honestly, with social media in general, right? Like why we should do it. Or Arthur, I know you're going to do a tech thing. We should probably spend like 20 minutes when we talk through that one, just why we're off social media. The only one I've been on is Reddit in, I don't know how long. And just recently Blue Sky. But that's, hopefully a better place. But that in like all the bad actors that are on there trying to just make it so confusing. And that's like, you're talking about the comment section. Like there's probably really great people out there calling out bad stuff. I guarantee there's also just paid people out there that are just throwing shit into the comments, trying to make it chaotic, make people feel fear and they can't get a handle on things every time they go online. Right. That's definitely a tactic, I would say.
Absolutely. If I was a shrewd media institution like legacy media and I recognized that television is going away and I still want to maintain my influence on the discourse, I absolutely have dozens and dozens of paid people on social media posting my narratives every day as if they're their own, right? Like that's absolutely happening.
100%.
And that's a whole other thing. There's a guy on TikTok that does this like breaking news thing, every single video, breaking news this, breaking news that, and you can just scroll through his page and it's just breaking news, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. And it's like, what is your point? What are you doing?
That's funny.
Like, who's paying you?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Should that be our intro segment every time? Breaking news.
I was thinking maybe we do like a lie of the week segment, which could be fun, but there might be a bit too many out there.
You could pick some really fun things though. Like it could be like an Onion kind of article where it's like it's true, but it shouldn't.
Yeah. Like if we were live a little while ago, it would have probably been the Trump Jr. visit to Greenland and all the Greenland MAGA supporters or something like that. Like that would have great, like bold-faced lie that they were in. Oh man, but
it's funny. This week I read it's going to be plastic straws.
I saw that. Yeah.
In the executive order is called back to plastic.
Back to plastic.
Like they're already acknowledging that it's a backwards move.
What's the lobby on that? Is there literally a plastic straw lobby or?
I mean, I'm sure it's like a microplastics friend or something, but have you seen, there's like all on Reddit now, there's like 30 photos of Trump trying to like drink out of paper straws and he just like can't do it.
He doesn't have the lip muscles to like squeeze or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they don't work.
Honestly, that was just like one of those things that I thought would not have staying factor in the culture war. I was like, I thought we got past like the plastic straw thing. I thought we were okay now, but apparently not. Like that's another one that's got to come back.
We're going to bring styrofoam back everywhere.
I'm not like a plastics person, but it uses oil, right? Like plastics are made from oil. Like,
totally.
Isn't that like an oil lobby kind of thing? Gas is going away. You gotta be able to use the oil somehow.
Yeah. That'd be interesting to find out how much plastic straws, like what does that add to the economy and who makes the money? Because like that's usually the answer, right? Like where's the money going? And then we can figure it out from there.
And then you look at the donor list of the, whatever political campaign and it's number 4,
Yeah. No, that's the thing I was going to say to round out the worldview thing is like, what are the resources that are being used in a society? Like what are we could talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo and all of our technology that's complicit in these like literal slave mines over there. Right. That's true of any point in history. And that's something that Zinn does really well in the book when he goes through different wars and stuff. He points out what are the resources that U.S. corporations need from this or that land. And does it happen to coincide with a war that happened there? Shocking. Like follow the resources, follow the money, follow the manufacturing. Like you'll figure out who's behind it.
Well, that's like the whole thing with Greenland and Canada, right? It's hedging bets on climate change and also gaining access to mass amounts of uranium in Greenland that has been like agreed not to be mined.
and also
Mm.
Canada's natural minerals.
Going to war with Canada? What's going on?
I don't know. I feel like Greenland would be the easier target for them, but maybe they're just gonna say fuck it and go for Panama, Canada, and Greenland at the same time. I don't know. I'll probably be in Canada if that happens, though, guys. Like,
Yeah,
I got
think so.
I got an hour and 30 to the border.
Wow, that's
Lucky
nice.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're welcome. We'll build a railroad.
You enter into the speakeasy, you go downstairs, they're just in Canada.
That's it from us this week. If you enjoy the show, please share with your friends or family and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening, and remember that propaganda loves you.